What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. I wanted to play a little game. We're just going to call it What's Next. And then I'll just insert, whoever, a team, a player, a situation. Because there's so much going on. It's like I don't want to just do like individual. It's like let's just play a little game. So this will just be what's next for the Browns and Deshaun Watson, and I'll rattle off a bunch of other ones too. But I wanted to start with this: what is next for Deshaun Watson and the Browns? First and foremost, this is easily the worst situation in the league when you factor in the contract, the coach now being forced to lie, the quarterback who has this look like he's just kind of dead inside when you see his eyes, right? And then as an individual player, he is just horrendous. I even saw some new stats today. Obviously, him against the blitz is like historically poor since like the 1970 merger. His eye test of just when he scrambles around and just ends up in these hellacious sacks. And unless it's a dink or dunk, there is nothing there. And you watch some of these great athletic, and all these guys are different from each other, but he was in the mold of Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray. Lamar was always better than even Houston Deshaun, but just a guy that can really scramble around, move around, and be explosive down the field. All those guys, like the Seattle version of Russell, not the guy we see now. We don't actually see a guy now because he's on the sideline, which is like not quite sure what's going on. And they said they're going to go with a quarterback switch. I would not. Under no circumstances, I will just go down with Fields. I will not have Russell Wilson dinking and dunking me to losses. At least there's always a chance Justin Fields can just take off or hit a deep bomb. But that's a conversation for another day. But what is next for this situation? Because you can't cut him. Let's just hypothetically said they cut him tomorrow, which is not going to happen. But let's just use as an example. I thought about this today. I don't think he'd ever play in the NFL again. He'd be like, John, how can you say that? We have seen so many, good players who had questionable off the field situations get second chances. That has always happened. And guess what? It always will happen. This capitalism and the best of the best, if you're better than your peers, we will overlook your problems. Because I think Doc Rivers said this one time, if your production outweighs your problems, we'll make a spot for you. Well, this guy's production literally outweighs nobody. He's the worst player in the NFL. I feel pretty confident saying that. Like Trevor Lawrence has played bad and has not had a good season at all. There is not a general manager in the NFL. There is not a head coach in the NFL. There is not a fan in the NFL who would take Deshaun Watson over Trevor Lawrence. Anthony Richardson, who we'll get into in a minute, is a pretty big roller coaster, right? You would take working with that, and obviously he's a good guy, no issues, over whatever the hell Deshaun Watson is. I do feel very strongly if this offseason they were just to bite the bullet and cut him, because the trade market obviously is non-existent, I don't think we would ever see this guy play in the NFL again. So think about when you think, where is this team going to go? They are forced to ride it out. Who knows? Maybe 2 more years. I don't see it going past this year and next if he continues to play like this. But I do see a scenario where they just roll this out for the next couple of years, given what they're paying him. For a player, I'm not talking a starter. I'm talking being on another roster. Would not be on another roster in the National Football League. I saw some people today because Kevin Stefanski said after the game, he's our quarterback. Basically, got his back. Like, we're not benching him. And that was a huge hoopla on the internet. Put in Jameis Winston. It can't be worse than that. And that I agree with. It's impossible to be worse than this. Because you get this guy who has lost all of his confidence, who clearly no longer looks like a good athlete, whose arm looks dramatically worse than it once did. And he is just running back there like a chicken with his head cut off, just running into defensive linemen, getting hit like a pinball. Like it's an awful watch. It really is. And then you factor in the toxicity of his brand, given what he stands for outside of the NFL, that I just don't see a solution here. And I can't imagine being a Browns fan going, we're going to be stuck with this guy for whatever, 25 more games that we have to watch him. But why would it get better once this situation ends? Your owner has proven to be completely nuts. He really has. Like Deshaun Watson is on your team because he simply got involved. He was never going to be a Brown, ever. Did not want to come there. And he said, we will fully guarantee every penny. And David Malgetta, one of the only guys who will support Deshaun Watson publicly and probably privately, of course he would. He's the agent. He's got his hand in the cookie jar on that deal. If I was him, I would too. That's most business. You look past shit when you're profiting from it. And that's what he does here. But this situation is really, really ugly. And you can't convince me Kevin Stefanski's just some village idiot now. I watched him last year with Joe Flacco. And there's a reason they didn't call Joe Flacco, who we'll get to next, because you couldn't. The owner, I'm giving this guy all the money. If he wants to get rid of the coordinator, if he wants to, I don't want Joe Flacco around. I don't even want to risk the chance that, imagine if Joe Flacco was the backup right now. It's one thing with Jameis Winston, put Jameis Winston in. A lot of us could argue, like, is Jameis Winston even any good? I'm sure he's better than Deshaun Watson. That's a low bar. But if Joe Flacco was on the team, there wouldn't be one fan who essentially is your consumer, because without them, none of this exists. That $230 million doesn't just come from the sky. It comes from the television networks who get it because of all these people willing to watch these games. The Browns have a big fan base. And if they're watching this, it would be a mutiny in Brea, Ohio, if they would not put Joe Flacco in. So if I might even give them credit on this one. You could not bring Joe Flacco because we all saw this coming. We all did. So when you hear Joe Flacco tell, I don't even know who it was last week, Albert Breer or McAfee, like, yeah, they didn't call me. But he's like, nothing really surprises me. He's being nice. He knows why. He knows why. Because I'm watching what's next for Joe Flacco in the Indianapolis Colts. Because you watch them and you watch him and you go, he's the best quarterback on the team. He's really the best quarterback on multiple teams. He's the best quarterback on the Colts. He's the best quarterback on the Cleveland Browns. This is a guy that everyone was making fun of 3 or 4 years ago. And now he's clearly the best player for like several teams in the NFL. So I do understand like the difference of the Deshaun situation and Anthony Richardson. You take this kid 4th overall. And part of drafting him high was, listen, there's a lot here to work with. But we got to work with this. We got to mold it. We got to figure it out. There's something there. But this isn't just some plug and play scenario, right? He wasn't going to look like the way Jaden looks right now, or even Trevor Lawrence earlier on in his career, or Jared Goff, or just some of these quarterbacks that, like, even when they're kind of shitty, it's like, I can kind of see that. Anthony Richardson is I think he has the lowest QBR, Florio, which sounds crazy because I thought Deshaun did, but so far, now he's only played a couple games because of injuries, and Flacco has only played 2 games. Obviously, replacing him has the highest. Flacco just looks good. He really does. And I understand putting Anthony Richardson back into the game, and I think it would be easier to just redshirt him if this was his rookie season. I'd be like, you know what, guys? Let's just take a breath. Let's let him sit from behind and learn, take notes, and just kind of soak it all in. But it's his 2nd year. So let's just give him a couple more weeks till he's ready. Well, let's say Flacco wins a couple games. And that logic of like, just roll out Flacco. It's like, okay. And you can live in the here and now. But part of drafting the guy high was, 1, we believed in his talent, but 2, the contract. part of the benefit of drafting a quarterback in the top 10 or the first couple rounds and then playing him immediately, if he's good, is that he doesn't cost you very much money. So they'd be all out of whack. And I just think you get yourself in these weird situations where there's no way they can say with a straight face that Anthony Richardson is today is a better player than Joe Flacco and gives our team a better chance today. Like Anthony Richardson against the Jags would not have given them a better chance to win than Joe Flacco. Anthony Richardson against the Steelers 2 weeks ago would not have given them a better chance than Joe Flacco. And I'm not anti-Anthony Richardson, though I've been a little concerned pre-injury what we saw. I'm still pro projects, high character, hardworking projects, which from all accounts, people I know in the league and just knowing the Colts, I like everything I heard about Anthony Richardson. So it doesn't mean they're all going to work, but I am a proponent of doing that as a drafting strategy. Sometimes you can't just fucking try to hit an opposite field single. Like, hey, we're down 3 runs. We got to run on a second, third. Let this fucking thing rip. Try to hit one off the wall. And I'm a fan of that logic and that mindset in most walks of life, obviously including football. But eventually you get some information. Now, we have a lot to learn with Anthony Richardson. I would say the one thing that like is kind of a fact is he gets injured all the time. It's like, well, the play calling. Well, I can't just have him drop back and throw it 40 times because he's one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks in the league. So I kind of got to run him. And it's like, well, all these quarterbacks are running around, no problem. Lamar does it. Jaden Daniels is doing it. Dude's running like a gazelle. It's like, can this guy do it? I mean, because if he can't, and he's always going to get hurt whenever he runs because he doesn't slide, which is also a problem, we got problems. And this whole thing is going to be a disaster. What's next for Davante Adams? I've thought a lot about this. One, to me, the Jets have absolutely no business trading for him. And if they were to lose on Monday Night Football to the Bills and fall to 2-4, like, let's just be real. This team ain't rattling like a 4-game win streak off. You're probably destined to be a 7-8 win team. So getting rid of a pick, which Adam Schefter reported, I know a lot of Raider fans. I have been around that organization and seen how passionate the fan base is. It's pretty special. It's a unique organization. It's kind of got this collegiate feel with alumni, with the history to this like I don't know, succession with Al Davis of being this like powerful patriarch of it all and just being nuts, but being great. And then they've had 20 plus years of just embarrassment. And I think I mentioned this yesterday, Charles Woodson's comments of like, why can't we have nice things? And this is not all on the Raiders. You know, Davante clearly, some of his comments I thought he made in the receiver documentary is like, like I could see being his teammate and being like, my standard is my standard, even if we lose. Well, you're just mad you got 2 balls, right? And you're a high character team first guy, always, I thought, but then you're bitching and moaning last year when you won some games because you only caught 1 ball. Like, that's not really how it works. Imagine a quarterback after his team wins, bitching and moaning that he only threw 1 touchdown. Like, yeah, I'll be happy when I throw 3 or 4. No one says that. No defensive lineman's pissed off after his team wins because he didn't have a sack. Whole point, you practice all week to try to win. So I'm not absolving Davante from this, but one thing I've heard out there in the grapevine is that I think the Antonio Pierce they saw after they all put Josh McDaniels in a guillotine, stabbed him in the back, lit his body on fire, and threw him in one of that Vegas lake where they found a bunch of bodies from the mob, essentially, which I don't even blame them for doing. He was objectively bad. And I watched a decent amount of Raider games, and his teams stunk. It was not going well. So get it. But you ride this Antonio Pierce wave. One thing I heard the offseason, he starts feeling himself a little bit. It might be a little different vibe to him than what it was previously, which is part of it. Like being the interim coach, being the head guy, it's a little different. But here's what I know. I'm watching your team and you're getting fucking ransacked. Sean Payton just made you look like a JV squad. You can only hold on to coming back 10 points to the Ravens for so long. We'll be in Halloween before you know it, and that game will seem like a distant memory. So, yeah, it was cool smoking those cigars and puffing your chest out. If you played the Ravens 10 times, I think most of us are betting on them basically 10 out of 10 times. Yeah, you might beat them once, maybe twice, but they're getting you 80+% of the time. So I think when you look at this whole situation, the Raiders are a mess, are an absolute disaster. And now the owner wants to dictate the cost of what Davante's value would be. This is my issue with some of these owners. Like Mark, who's not really a meddler, but I get it from his standpoint of like, how many times are we going to trade a high pick, which they traded a first round pick for this guy, and now his value, you just tell me, is like they give us a third and we give them Davante in a fifth, and it's essentially like a fourth. Well, it's like, well, the money, the cap, and that's the fact. Like, no one's offering us a second. He's 32 years old. He's currently injured, we think. But some of those comments aren't exactly like, yeah, I'll throw the kitchen sink at the guy. So I just think, what's next for Davante? I could see him being on the Raiders. I saw Antonio Pierce saying, kind of status quo. Status quo. You guys just, this is why you always got to be careful with these, the bad organizations, right? You see it in the NBA a lot when guys go to certain teams and it's like, this is really going to work. This team finally going to be relevant. And like 3 weeks later, that dude wants a trade. It's like what happened to the Brooklyn Nets with all those guys that came through. It's like, yeah, of course. Like this is going to be a disaster. Anything with the Raiders, even when it feels like, God, you got Josh McDaniels from the Patriots, resurrect his career, Davante back with his boy Derek Carr. 2 years later, they're all gone. And even Max Crosby's having to go on rants about Michael Lombardi, how he doesn't want to leave and he doesn't know shit. It's like, well, Max, does feel like kind of weird right now. It really does. And the more often you get your ass kicked, it wasn't necessarily Max's fault. I mean, he's playing his ass off. He's injured. But like, no one takes the franchise seriously. I think people think they can take advantage of the Raiders. And it's going to be interesting how this plays out. What's next for the Pats QB situation? I'll be honest, I didn't watch a snap of that game. Not a snap. And I'm proud of it because the game's irrelevant. It really is. And Miami without Tua is also irrelevant. But the Pats, as long as Jacoby's playing, no one that doesn't live in New England that does what I do for a living needs to watch them play. Now, the moment Drake plays, got to throw him on a TV. I want to watch what's going on. If Tua were to come back from Miami, okay, I'll pay back attention. But if you're rolling out Tyler Huntley against Jacoby Brissett, I think you'd have to pay most football fans to consume that. And it was not broken, but it was alluded to by the rap sheets and Schefter that, like, there's some movement. Might be time for Drake Maye to come play. Here was the problem with this logic of we're going to redshirt him, right? He's not going to play. He's going to sit behind the team. We're going to do some of this practice stuff where he gets 30 to 40% of the snaps, which is unheard of in the NFL. Your team was always going to suck. And it turns out you suck even worse. You have scored a total of 26 points the last 3 games. 26 points the last 3 games. I mean, they're not even averaging 9 points a game right now over that period. It's impossible to hold the young guy back because eventually the owner, who's old, and let's face it, most people, I can't even imagine the discourse in that area after everything that happened this summer with him like creating a documentary to bash Belichick, that people are going to want to see Drake Maye because that's the only way for you to stay relevant because no one can watch that. And I will defend people that push back on, like, if you're a Patriot fan, you don't get to just drop the team. But I don't blame you if you're just not really paying attention this year. It's like, wake me up if Drake May's starting the game. If not, like, I can take my wife to lunch if I have to miss a Patriot game. Like, who cares? Like, I'm not expecting us to ever just rattle off Super Bowls again, but that's not worth our time. It's really not. And it's not all their fault. Belichick the last couple of years, bad job drafting, but it's a tough watch. And Jacoby is an impressive guy as a human. Player, pretty terrible. He really is.